Hey up, it's Steve from that old Yorkshire geek, and I'm here with me Sunday live news stream. Hope you enjoyed that bit of music at the beginning. I just fancied doing it. Right, so we've got some news stories today. One or two, not really. Well, actually, a couple of news stories and a few lists, to be honest. There's not much going on today. Before we start, don't forget, like and subscribe, share the videos, drop a comment, hit the notification bell if you're subscribed already. So I'm live on YouTube. I'm also live on Rumble. Yes, we are. And Twitch. We're live on there. Ooh, 2 people watching on Twitch. I think one of them's me. What else? Later on, it'll be on Spotify, Amazon Music Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Links are in the description for all that. As I've linked my 2 books, they're down there. Can't be bothered getting them. They're on Amazon. Give them a look. Links in the description for all that. I'm also, there we go, pop that up. I'm also on Patreon, as you can see from that little, where is it? I'm rubbish at this. That. I'm also on Patreon, so have a look at that. £3 a month, and you get some like exclusive content and early access stuff. I'll put like videos up like a week early before I put them on YouTube or whatever. So there we go. That's that. Right, let's get on with the news. Oh, first off, before we start that, I saw a film last night, and I was sat crying my eyes out at it. And that film was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It was amazing. It was amazing. I'll just pop this up, and then we'll just play this in the background. There we go.
We were gone for quite a while.
I'll have to take that off. Take the audio off. It's a really, really good film. I don't think the trailer does it justice, to be honest. I was expecting it being a bit naff, to be honest. To be completely, bull's pizzled frank about this. Like I said, this is only a small part of the film, this part. Yes, it's funny. But as I said on Facebook, when I watched it, I put a thing on Facebook saying, bloody hell, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is dark, and it is very dark compared to the other 2. But it also makes you laugh, and it also makes you cry, and it'll shock you as well in some parts of it. But it's really, really good, and it's the best Marvel film as a whole, including the Sony Spider-Man films, in my opinion. The best Marvel film since Infinity War, all the way back then. So there we go. So I won't say anything else about it, apart from, it's a great story, and that's all I can say about it. It looks goofy in places from this trailer. Like I said, the trailer doesn't really do it justice. You've just got to watch it. It's quite long. I wasn't really timing it, to be honest. But I think it's like 2.5 hours-ish, I think. But it's really good. I didn't know what to expect because I've not seen any spoilers because I wasn't expecting much of it, so I haven't really been looking it up or coming across spoilers or anything like that, and haven't accidentally come across any. I thought I'd seen a spoiler where such and such a character died, but that spoiler wasn't true. So there we go. So a character doesn't die. I'll not tell you which one doesn't die, but anyway. Right, so we'll leave it there. As soon as the trailer's finished, we'll leave it there. So I just thought I'd share that with you. Right. I'll get rid of that. Right, so we'll get on with the story, shall we? Where are we? There we go. First one. This from Bounding in. There we go. It's been slow. Don't know why. Maybe it's the heat. I don't know. But anyway. Right, first up. Here we go. It's from Bounding into Comics. Could get spicy. From John F. Trent. He's been dialing back the preachiness recently. Maybe he's noticed that people have been commenting on it. But anyway, here we go. Karen Allen disappointed about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny separating. Spoilers, by the way. Spoilers for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny if you've not seen it. Separating Indy and Marion and killing Mutt. Not in the film, off screen. Actress Karen Allen, who plays, by the way, sorry, apologies if I do sound a bit fed up. I am a bit fed up, to be honest. I'm a bit, I don't know, I'm a bit down. I can't blame the weather because the weather's glorious. Maybe it's because I'm stuck in. That's why. But anyway. Actress Karen Allen, who plays Marion Ravenwood in the Indiana Jones franchise, recently shared she was disappointed with many of the plot points of James Mangold's Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I nearly said density then. I nearly went all George McFly. In an interview with Variety, Allen was asked by Adam B. Vary, is that his real name? It sounds like a wrestler from the 80s. Anyway, so when you learned that the new script had Indy and Marion separated, very much on the way to divorce, and also that Mutt had been killed in Vietnam, what was your reaction? By the way, speaking on the way to divorce, if you notice at the beginning of the film, it shows the divorce papers, and it says Marion Ravenwood on it. It doesn't say Marion Jones. It says Marion Ravenwood. So she obviously kept her maiden name. Was that a thing back then? Whenever they got married, the 50s, did a lot of women keep their maiden name? I don't think they probably did. Alan responded, "Well, I was disappointed, of course." She went on to elaborate, "I knew that there had been talk that they did not want to go forward with Shire, so I knew that was something. So I knew that something in the story had to create the potential for him to not be there in a way that made sense. How about just have him not be there? Could have him say, I haven't spoken to Mutt for 10 years or whatever, that he's buggered off. They have to kill the poor kid." But another made it a plot point in the film. Spoilers again. Another made it a plot point that Indy was, sad that he basically never, he lost his son basically. And if he'd used the time travel thing to go back in time and tell him to stop going to Vietnam, tell him to stop signing up. But whatever. I didn't know that he was going to die in Vietnam until I read the script. Oh gosh, maybe it was maybe 6 months before they were going to start shooting, she added. Alan did reveal she was happy that Marion got to return at the end of the film. "I was deeply happy that Marion came back, at least at the end of their story. If this is indeed truly the last film of this particular group of films, if this is the last story with Harrison as Indy and me as Marion, I was profoundly happy that it didn't end without them coming back together." She concluded, "That meant a lot to me, to feel like they were going to ride off in the sunset or into the sunset together." They keep showing her, don't they? They keep putting pictures of her up, don't they, John? Alan would also be asked by the Hollywood Reporter's Brian Davids, was it heartbreaking to read what happened to Indy and Marion's family in the intervening years? She answered, "Well, it was. When Stephen was still going to direct the film, I didn't have the opportunity to read any of those scripts, although I know that Marion was much more involved in the story at that juncture. Stephen and I had spoken after he decided he was going to step down as director, and he said to me, 'You're going to love working with James Mangold.' And I said, 'Oh, great.' So I knew James had hired new writers and that there was going to be a whole new approach with a new director and new writers, but I was really going into the unknown," she explained. There's been a story, actually, hasn't there, this week about James Mangold admitting that he basically wrote out Marion. She was going to have a bigger part in the film, but he essentially wrote her out apart from at the end. Anyway, Alan then reiterated her disappointment at the way the film depicted the relationships between Marion, Indy, and Mutt. And the next thing, quote, "And the next thing I knew, I was reading a script that told Dial of Destiny's story, and of course I was disappointed." She explained, by the way, that might not mean she's didn't like the script. Maybe she was just, disappointed that she didn't have a bigger part or that the family had broken up or whatever. Not that she didn't like it, but well, maybe it does. I don't know. There's many ways you can interpret it. She explained, "I had thought that I would be majorly a part of the film, and that was just not the direction they decided to go." Oh, so she was disappointed in that. Because remember, she'd been told by Steven Spielberg that she was going to be a major part of the film. But then when James Mangold took over, he wrote her out. Maybe he didn't like her. I don't know. "I think they had some problems to solve with the story in terms of Shia LaBeouf not coming back, and they chose to create this story that Mutt had been killed in the war and that it put a wedge between Marion and Indy. I mean, you could have knocked me over with a feather when I read it." Laughs. "But I was really happy that they came back together in the end," she concluded. Alan would also share, by the way, there they are at the end of Destiny, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, getting married with Shia LaBeouf there, and whoever that is, can't remember. Alan would also share her own headcanon for what Marion was doing while she and Indy were separated to Variety. I wasn't given a lot of information in the script, and we know Mutt has been killed. We know it drove a wedge between them, but we don't know much else. So I usually sit down and write a little bit of history and think it through. In my headcanon, Mutt is one of those fellas that Rambo rescues in Rambo 2. That's Mutt in there somewhere. She continued, it was just a sense that they had not seen each other for a while and that there was a real sense of them grieving in very different ways, as I know people do when they lose a child. I liked the thought of coming into that room without really knowing what I was going to find or whether it was the right thing to do. But I think Marion at that point maybe has come to some decisions herself about whether or not she wants this to be the end of the relationship, Alan relayed. Alan is not the only one who was disappointed with how Lucasfilm treated the relationships between Indy, Marion and Mutt. Film critic Gary Beekler at Nerdrotic shared his thoughts during his review of the film. That's not language here. There's his video, link for his video. Specifically, I'm in a mood, so I might actually drop an F-bomb or two here, but no, I'll try not to. Specifically, discussing Indy's relationship with Mutt, he says, we find out that Indiana Jones, if he could go back in time, would try to keep his son Mutt from enlisting because he enlisted into the Vietnam War to piss Indiana Jones off, and that's where he died. So Mutt died, pissed at his father, F this movie. See, I restrained myself. Speaking specifically to the ending of the film, when Karen Allen's Marion returns, Beekler remarks, all to bring us to a very contrived ending and the return of Karen Allen's Marion, where they reverse and repurpose a scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, and this is supposed to be the happy ending. Yes, they do. They redo the it hurts scene, you know, where it doesn't hurt there and it doesn't hurt there and all that. Of course, you'll have to forget it completely destroys the one good thing about Crystal Skull, the ending, where Indy and Marion get married in front of their son, he added. What do you make of Karen Allen's disappointment? Blah, 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 blah. There we go. It's not a great film. It's not the worst film ever made. It's not a great film, to be completely honest. And Gary's right. And, you know, everybody else is right with their criticisms of it. It's a very contrived script. And it's another one where they've made the hero a bitter, twisted old man who's essentially a deadbeat dad who fell out with his family and basically lives by himself. A shell of his former self. They do it every time, don't they? Is it Kathleen Kennedy that writes all this down? Is she written like a Bible for how she wants the stories of Lucasfilm to go? I don't know, but that's how they all seem to go. Oh, we've got to have a brunette British woman in every film for some reason. I don't know why, but they do. Or they seem to. But yes, there we go. So that's that. So Karen Allen was disappointed. Yes, I think everybody was disappointed. And he was pointless as well. That mop-headed freak there. Just happens to know. We need somebody who can fly. Well, why do we have a pilot? No, we'll just have a kid that practices flying with tin cans and stuff. But then when he gets in the plane, he knows what to do. It's rubbish. Is it? No, I've decided it's not. I've said it's not the worst film ever made, and it's not, but it is rubbish. And I said it wasn't very good. I've decided it's rubbish. Right, we'll leave it there. We'll leave that one there. We'll move on. I'll be here all bloody day, and I don't want to be. Right. Anyway, next up, another one for me to get angry at. Katie Sackhoff marvels that Mandalorian catering budget dwarfs entire budget of Battlestar Galactica. I've never worked on something with a budget this big, she says. And there she is, the lovely Katie Sackhoff. The Mandalorian actress, Katie Sackhoff, is that a real name? Was she born with that name? Is that an actual name or is that a stage name? I don't know. Katie. Anyway, said the catering budget alone for the Star Wars spin-off show engulfs the entire budget of Battlestar Galactica. And it's probably why modern Hollywood's, going down the drain because they're just wasting money left, right, and centre. Every Disney film costs upwards of $200 million for some reason. Even cheap film, so-called cheap films that are going straight to Disney Plus, like Crater, for instance, that they took off Disney Plus after 7 weeks, cost the company over $50 million, and that's classed as a low budget film these days. Sackhoff, who plays Mandalorian Royal Bo-Katan Kryze, shared this with Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett director Bryce Dallas Howard on her Blah 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 podcast, which I've still not seen. People have been saying it's really good and you should really watch it. But there's a link for it there if you want to watch it. It's on Apple. It's a link to the Apple podcasts. It might be on YouTube. I don't know. Anyway. Because I like Bryce Dallas Howard. I do. Anyway, I've never worked on something with a budget this big, Sackhoff said. Our catering budget is probably the entire budget of Battlestar Galactica. Granted, that was 20 years ago. The Battlestar Galactica alum, she portrayed pilot Cara Starbuck Thrace. Remember how that went down when that series started. But we all warmed to her. But we weren't happy about that. That was woke before the word was even invented. Anyway, how dare they make Starbuck a woman? Anyway, went on to describe how she was used to shooting episodes of television in shortened amounts of time. Most episodes of television learn to speak. Ugh. Most episodes of television that I'm used to shoot in 8 days. It is so fast, and you only get 2 to 3 takes, and that's it, Sackhoff said in the episode release Wednesday. They used to joke and call me the one-take wonder because I would know exactly what I was going to do. I would have it all planned. I would know the story. And yes, I would fly by the seat of my pants inside that box. But I knew I had 1 or 2 takes to get it perfect. And that was it, from every angle, mind you. Sackhoff, who also voiced a character in the Clone Wars, Bo-Katan, emphasized Howard's skill at taking advantage of the more leisurely production time. The amount of takes you do is like my bread and butter. I think that we got to take 3, and I was convinced that was it because that's my experience. We once did 38 takes of one scene for a TV show. That's diabolical. That is legitimately the opposite of what I'm used to. I absolutely love it because it gives the ability to find different things inside what I thought, she said. And then sometimes you get so over it that you'll give a different performance. You're like, oh my God, I didn't expect that. That wouldn't have come without me completely abandoning everything that I'd already done or thought I knew. Oh, is that it? There we go. But there we go. That's just, I only picked this. I didn't read the article, but I've not read any of these, by the way. I just picked it because of that claim that the Mandalorian catering budget dwarfed the entire budget of Battlestar Galactica. I think she's being kind of hyperbolic. I don't think it does in real life. But I imagine it's quite high, the catering budget on these Disney shows, because they're just burning money for some reason. Is there some, money laundering going on or something like that? There's something weird going on. There is particularly in Disney, because other studios aren't spending $200 million on the films. Some of them are over $300 million. Warner Brothers do. They seem to be spending that sort of money. Are they in league with Disney? I don't know. Or maybe they're just being overcharged by the special effects companies. But anyway, let's move on. Let's move on to the next one. What are we up to next? Oh, a bit of Star Trek next. Might start yawning because I didn't sleep well last night. We had a couple of coolish nights. It's been really warm here in the UK. But we've had a couple of coolish nights where I didn't have to have the fan on in the bedroom fan. Because most houses in the UK don't have air conditioning. So we've got to either leave the windows open or have, fans blowing or whatever if it gets too hot. Which, it has started doing every summer, really. For the last few years, we've started having quite hot summers for the UK anyway. But for the last couple of nights, it's been, very nice. But last night were hot and sticky again. And even with my fan on, I didn't sleep well. Anyway, right. Hang on. I nearly forgot then. Right. How Strange New Worlds writers define Star Trek canon. From Slash Film, or should I say Italic Eye Film. Star Trek Strange New Worlds is a prequel, which means that by definition it operates under storytelling constraints. The season 1 finale, A Quality of Mercy, reenacted the classic original series episode Balance of Terror. I didn't reenact it, like reinterpreted it, didn't it? Because it were different. All to show why things must proceed as the audience knows they do. We've talked before about how Strange New Worlds uses a loose approach to canon, and there's a link, presumably, to that article. But even if the minor details don't always add up, the bigger picture ones have to. According to co-creator / showrunner Akiva Goldsman, the Strange New Worlds writers' room isn't just winging it when it comes to canon either. Was it either? Speaking to Collider, Goldsman and his show-running partner Henry Alonso Myers defined their own take on Trek canon. Asked if they consider Star Trek comics or novels canon. A minute. Cold coffee. Goldsman gave a firm no. I wish I had an echo button, that could be no, whoa, whoa. Unless it's appeared on screen. I've got a soundboard here, but I can't do echoes with that because I plug my microphone in and it doesn't work for some reason. Anyway, never mind. Forgot where I'm now. Unless it's appeared on screen, it's technically not canon. It's secondary referenced material, which is true. That's what Gene Roddenberry's always said, or before he died, he always said that. Unless it's on screen, it's not canon. Goldsman explained, this makes sense since Star Trek is primarily a television and film franchise. Few people, except Trekkies / Trekkers, will ever read tie-in literature. Oh, hang on. I'm burping, which means, you know what it's time for? Here it comes.
I am so sorry. I was just finishing up a lovely lunch.
Which I have, by the way. About an hour and a half ago. Where were we? Goldsman added that this on-screen definition of canon means that Star Trek, the animated series, is canon and could be considered seasons 4 and 5 of the original series. But in that regard, Gene Roddenberry never considered the animated series canon. It didn't. Other people did, but Gene Roddenberry never did. I think the only episode of the original series that he may have considered canon was the episode Yesteryear, the one with Spock, where he travels through the Guardian of Forever back to his youth on Vulcan. That one. I think that's the only one that Gene Roddenberry considered a canon episode, but the rest he didn't. Anyway, this is a marked change from previous uncertainty about whether that series counts. What did Myers have to add? Myers stressed, was it Myers? Whatever, don't matter, don't care. Myers stressed that Strange New Worlds is a show meant to be enjoyed by Trek diehards and newcomers alike. We really don't want to alienate, Myers said, and that approach is plenty evident on screen. As for how this affects characters with locked-in fates, he explained, we're going to get into this in a bit, about, fates. Locked in. Anyway, yes, we know where they're gonna go. Yes, we have an idea because we've been told where they come from, but the characters don't know where they're gonna go, and so that's how we approach them. We approach them like they're real people who are experiencing actual emotional moments that we want to see. Right. So in the recent episode of Strange New Worlds, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, we learned that Khan never left Earth in 1996 aboard the Botany Bay, so therefore he was never lost in space and found by the Enterprise in the 23rd century. So, he doesn't have that locked-in fate, does he, does Khan? We find that he's still a child in 2022. Don't know why they've picked 2022 for that year as well. I mean, it's part of our past. They keep trying to say they're trying to make Star Trek our future. But as my good friend Wingrace / Archmage Frey said, But in that episode where they made it in 2022, which is now our past, they had a bridge blowing up, which we know never happened. So he pointed that out. So it's still not part of our future, is it? And he said they want to make it an aspirational future, which it was anyway. So you don't have to keep changing things. You could have left Khan back in 1996 if you want it to be the same timeline, but they don't. They've changed it now. It's a different timeline. It is a different timeline, which is fine by me. I'm not bothered. As long as we know, they should just admit it. That's the big bugbear for me, is that they won't admit it, that it's a different timeline. Just admit it. Just say it's. Just say from now on, we could go to the original series and Next Generation Beyond, or it could be totally different. It's more likely it's going to be totally different, isn't it? Because they're going to remake the original series, in my opinion. But anyway, right, where were we? Basically, it's the journey, not the destination. Myers specifically says that when writing for James Kirk, Paul Wesley, the focus is always on who Kirk is now, not the man he'll become. That means Wesley's acting material is always in the moment, not recitations of old beats. Even though they did kind of recite old beats with him, he said, "I'm from space." He said that, didn't he? Not a recitation. It's like a rejig, didn't he? Because he says in Star Trek 4, he says, "No, I'm from Iowa. I just work in outer space." Anyway, however, I think Myers inadvertently reveals why canon can be frustrating. Knowing Captain Pike's Anson Mount's ultimate fate adds a sour taste to his weekly adventures in Strange New Worlds, one that's hard to dislodge, especially since the show keeps reminding us of it. The same goes for Spock, Ethan Peck, and Nurse Chapel's Jess Bush. Budding romance, we know it won't work out since they're not together in the original series. I bet they change it. I bet they do. I bet it gets changed. And also, his relationship with T'Pring, which is kind of alluded to. I know it's not said for definitely, but it's kind of alluded to in the original series that Spock and T'Pring hardly know each other. They've maybe met a couple of times over, since their childhood when they were bonded or whatever. But in Strange New Worlds, they're a couple and, getting down and all that, aren't they? Anyway. Part of me, the author of the article, wishes that Strange New Worlds would drop the prequel framing and embrace being an alternate retelling of these characters, which I've just said. I wish they would. Wish they'd just say it. But they won't, because they think they'll lose. That's the thing. They think they'll lose the audience, and they think people will switch off. If it's not leading up to the original series, they think they'll lose all the, original Trekkers. Like me, I've been watching Star Trek since I was a kid, on black and white telly. But no, they won't lose me because I love Strange New Worlds. I think it's ace. I do. I think it's really good. I'm enjoying it. Anyway, that would free up possibilities for storytelling and emotional investment. Plus, Star Trek is no stranger to alternate timelines. Look at the 2009 Star Trek film, yes, which is the Kelvin timeline. I don't foresee this happening, though, so we'll just have to pretend we don't know the ending and live in the moment as the characters do. Blah, 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 blah. All right. So there we go. So, yeah, they should just admit that it's a different timeline. I mean, it is a different timeline. They just won't admit it. They're showing it on screen that it is a different timeline. But they won't put it in writing, will they? They won't say it with the producers. But I think they'll be forced to eventually. I honestly think they will. They'll be forced to. Eventually, they'll admit it, but not. They won't overtly admit it. They'll be forced to kind of acknowledge that things have changed. But anyway, there we go. So let's move on. What are we on next? Oh, here we go. Here we go. I'm saying here we go. You don't know what I'm talking about. The Kathleen Kennedy fired by Lucasfilm rumor explained. If you've been, living in a cave or whatever, there's been rumors that she's been fired because of the disastrous box office of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. There's rumors. There's a rumor going round. Got to clear out of town, etc. That she's been fired. I don't know where that came from. It's a Queen song, isn't it? Stone Cold Crazy. That's what it is. Anyway. Since Disney purchased Lucasfilm from its founder, George Lucas, in 2012, the studio has been helmed by Kathleen Kennedy. I honestly think it was a hostile takeover. I think she manoeuvred herself to take over Lucasfilm, probably whispering in George's ear, much like that's described in the preface of A New Hope, not A New Hope, the Star Wars novelization by Alan Dean Foster, that Palpatine had his people whispering in his ears, giving him bad advice and stuff, and declaring himself emperor and all that. And I think that's what happened there. I think she got close. She wanted to be the boss of a studio, and it was her that, because not long after she took charge, Disney swooped in, didn't they, and took over. So I think she had something to do with that. I've no evidence, of course. It's just my personal opinion, based on nothing but my personal opinion. Yeah. I haven't got people in studios feeding me information, because nobody watches my channel. Handpicked by Lucas to succeed him, Kennedy has overseen the Star Wars and Indiana Jones franchises for the past decade. Some might say run them into the ground, along with Willow. Howard the Duck must be crapping himself, as will Red Tails. Have they done anything else, Lucasfilm? Can't think of anything. Anyway, blah 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 blah. Past decade under Disney stewardship, but a new rumor, which appears not to be true, has circulated in recent days, suggesting Kennedy is slated to be replaced. I mean, it can't be true that she's being fired. We'd have known by now. When Victoria Alonso were fired, we knew instantly, didn't we? It were out in the trades and stuff, and everybody knew. So if there was somebody like Kathleen Kennedy, the head of a studio, were fired, it'd be out. It'd be out. The unsubstantiated claim has been traced to Twitter user @Thwipped. Thwipped. I mean, that's a sound effect name, isn't it? It's Spider-Man, isn't it? It's the Spider-Man sound, isn't it? It's his, Thwipped, his web slingers. I think it is, anyway. Anyway, who is known for leaking Disney news but has a spotty track record of accuracy. On June 29th, they tweeted, because we don't know the sex of them, I'm hearing Kathleen Kennedy is now gone from Lucasfilm. As far as it's probably a fella. As far as we know, Kennedy won't be looking for work anytime soon, as her current contract lasts through 2024, but the tweet was enough to confirm what plenty of fans who haven't been pleased with Lucasfilm wanted to hear. There's also been talk, hasn't there, that I think people like Stephanie Janicek, is it Janicek or Janicek, whatever, who I don't mind, by the way. I wish she'd do her videos a little bit better, more professionally, but just do it all on a phone or something, I don't know, but I don't mind listening to her. People don't like her voice, but I find her voice kind of soothing. I don't know why. But I don't mind listening to her. But she's up there with Doomcock and, to be honest, Cameron Pasha. I like Cameron Pasha as well, but I think more often than not, he's probably being fed false information. I don't think he's lying, and I don't think she's lying. And I don't think Doomcock's lying. I think Mike Zero's lying. I think he's just making stuff up, but I don't think they're lying. I think they do genuinely have people that work at Disney who are giving them information. I think more often than not, they're being fed false information. For whatever purpose, I don't know. Anyway, where were we? With the poor box office performance, I don't know, I might have finished that paragraph, I might have not. Who cares? With the poor box office performance of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, some assumed its tepid reception was the final straw for Kennedy. And while it remains possible that the executive is in hot water behind the scenes, reports of her firing appear to have no material basis. By the way, she's got this reputation of being one of the greatest producers in history, hasn't she? But is she? I don't know. What does she do? What producing things does she do? We always see her the names then produce, but what does she actually do? I don't know. I mean, she started off as Steven Spielberg's assistant, didn't she? And then she's worked her way up through whatever means. But is she actually a producer, or does she just hang around other producers, using her women's wiles. This is all conjecture again, and to basically get to the top. If you know what I mean. Anyway, a former producer for Steven Spielberg, Kathleen Kennedy, took charge of Lucasfilm in 2012. I mean, a former assistant for Steven Spielberg, just to get coffee and take notes badly, as Steven Spielberg himself has said. He said she used to sit in meetings, story meetings, taking notes, and he said she was rubbish at taking notes, but she was really good at interrupting and giving bad ideas. We've seen that she does interrupt a lot. When she's on stage and other people are being interviewed and asked questions, she does butt in quite a lot. It's what she does. It's a raison d'etre, it seems. Anyway, a former assistant of Steven Spielberg, Kathleen Kennedy, took charge of Lucasfilm in 2012. Yeah, I think that's actual. That is an actual accurate description. Took charge. She took it off. Took it away from George Lucas. In a way, in 2012, and became responsible for charting a new course for the studio, but a vocal subset, and by the way, lying to George Lucas's face. I don't like it. I don't like Kathleen Kennedy. I don't like the way she does things. I don't like the way she looks. I hate her bloody voice, and I don't like her actions as a studio head and producer. Anyway. But a vocal subset of Star Wars fans have been pushing for the removal of Kennedy as Lucasfilm president for some time now. The drama began to emerge following the mixed reception to 2017's Star Wars The Last Jedi, which divided the fan base like nothing the franchise had released before it. The movie was review bombed on Rotten Tomatoes, with an alt-right group taking credit for tanking the score. It's the first I've heard. Notably, however, The Last Jedi made over $1.3 billion at the box office. But Force Awakens made over $2 billion at the box office. Placing it amongst the most profitable movies of all time. Not anymore. At the time, maybe, but not anymore. If in fact Kennedy had a remarkable career long before she took the reins under Disney, but did she? A co-founder of Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment. I think her husband probably had more to do with that, to be completely honest. Amblin Entertainment production company. Her first project was the classic science fiction film E.T. the Extraterrestrial. The list of classics with her name on them only grew, including Jurassic Park, The Goonies, Back to the Future, Schindler's List, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. But to be a producer, you don't really have to do a lot. You can be called a producer on the film and do nothing. There's like associate producers and executive producers and line producers, and there's all different sorts of producers, and some of them don't do anything. You can just, the fella, for instance, this is a good example, going back to Star Trek 4 again. The fella, I forgot his bloody name now, him that were doing the punk rocker with the ghetto blaster that Spock did the neck pinch on. He was given like an associate producer or whatever credit on Star Trek 4, and he didn't do anything on it really, apart from that one scene. But he was given a producer's credit because they liked him basically, and that's how you can get producer's credit. Anyway, blame for the relative failure. Maybe she's an amazing producer. Maybe she organizes things behind the scenes. Maybe she's really good on the phone, phoning up, finding locations and getting right people for the job and stuff, which she hasn't done very well as head of Lucasfilm, finding the right people for the job, has she? Particularly directors, but because she's gone through a lot of those. But if using that as an example, then maybe she didn't do a lot before she became, head of Lucasfilm, and she was producer of all these films. Maybe she just sat in the office, drinking coffee or whatever, and with her feet up on the desk, letting other people do all the work and taking the credit for it. Again, that's just personal conjecture. Blame for the relative failure of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny to deliver another box office smash may be laid at Kennedy's feet. By the way, they're saying there, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah, it's got a name on them, but you know what her credit on Raiders of the Lost Ark is? Assistant to Mr. Spielberg. So you got a name, it's got a producer credit on Temple of Doom as associate producer. Again, it's a meaningless title. Anyway, blame for the relative failure of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny to deliver another box office smash may be laid at Kennedy's feet, but will it be enough to topple her monumental career? Unlikely. With that in mind, reports of friction between Kennedy and other higher-ups at Disney have circulated since late 2022, though they appear to be sourced from a YouTuber who claimed to have inside knowledge of the situation. That's probably Cameron Pasha or Stephanie Janicek. Follow their... Cameron Pasha, I don't think he's got a YouTube channel. He's got a Patreon page where he does a lot of his scoops. But he often appears on Doomcock's channel and other places. Pardon me. But... by all means, follow Stephanie Janicek's Smuggler's Cantina. Follow that. Some other YouTubers don't seem to like her. I think it's because of her voice. But I don't mind listening to her, to be completely honest. I have nothing against Stephanie. Right. But has she been fired? Has she not? As from Heel versus Babyface might sing, is she here or is she there? I've got it wrong way around. Is she there? Is she here? Kathleen Kennedy's employment status is unclear. Yay! That. She'll go when she's ready. That's what'll happen. All right, anyway, let's move on. Right, another one from Italic Eye Film. Hang on. Full screen. Try and be professional, man. Our classmate and ex-con, not Gary Beacle, by the way, led Gene Roddenberry closer to Star Trek. Obviously not Gary Beacle, because he's not that old, even though he is very, very old, younger than me. It may startle people to learn that Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, Genesis 2, Earth Final Conflict, and Andromeda, was not always a sci-fi fan. As a boy, he loved reading pulp adventure novels, but he wasn't any more drawn to sci-fi stories like John Carter of Mars than he was to period adventure tales like Tarzan the Ape Man, who were written by the same person, actually. Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote both of them, didn't he? I think. Anyway, he did also read more authors than Edgar Rice Burroughs. I should read these articles ahead of time, shouldn't I? When it came time to choose a major in college, Roddenberry didn't take classes in creative writing, but aeronautical engineering. Roddenberry was also a pilot and a member of the United States Air Force in the 1940s until a bad runway approach took him out of combat. He survived several other plane crashes besides. He also worked for the Los Angeles Police Department for most of the 1950s. That's where he got a lot of his probably material for his series, The Lieutenant, didn't he? Before Star Trek. While working as a cop, Roddenberry started penning his first scripts under the pen name Robert Wesley. Oh, is that where he got his Admiral Wesley from? And I think there's an Admiral Wesley in Star Trek. Or was it the animated series? I'm sure there's a Bob Wesley. Anyway, and quit to write full-time in 1956. His entire background can be found in David Alexander's 1994 book Star Trek Creator, the authorized biography of Gene Roddenberry. Sounds like a Lego game, doesn't it? Star Trek Creator. Anyway, Roddenberry's path to Star Trek is more closely analysed in the 50-year mission, the complete, uncensored, unauthorised oral history of Star Trek the first 25 years, edited by Mark A. Altman and Edward Gross. In that book, Roddenberry looked back over his childhood looking for sci-fi influences and sharply recalled two people who directed his creative energies towards sci-fi. One of them was a nerd who read a lot of sci-fi novels. The other was an ex-con who lived in a garage in his neighborhood. He too read a lot of sci-fi novels. And there's the original series cast. On the bridge of the Enterprise, the nerd and the ex-con sounds like an adventure story unto itself. Gene Roddenberry recalled a nerdy classmate with health issues who was really, really into tales of space travel, George McFly. In talking to him, Roddenberry learned about how exciting the genre was. In the 1920s and 1930s, sci-fi was popular in magazine form, and a lot of old magazines compiled classic stories and printed new tales and essays from local authors, as well like people like Arthur C. Clarke and Ray Bradbury and Robert Heinlein and all them. Their first early works were done in those pulp sci-fi magazines. Isaac Asimov and people like that. It was in the letter columns of sci-fi magazines that modern fandom, as we might know it, began to form in earnest. Roddenberry said, there was a boy in my class who life had treated badly. He limped, he wheezed. He was a charming, intelligent person. Because of being unable to do many of the things that others were able to do, he had sort of gone into his own world of fantasy and science fiction. He had been collecting the wonderful old, amazing and astounding magazines, and he introduced me to science fiction. The full name of Astounding magazine was Astounding Stories of Super Science. It later changed its name to Analog Science Fiction and Fact. The magazine is still in print to this day. Meanwhile, Amazing magazine was actually Amazing Stories, founded by author Hugo Gernsback. It was after Gernsback that the prestigious Hugo Awards were named. Amazing Stories is still published occasionally. Unfortunately, Roddenberry didn't say which stories or authors in particular he and his classmate bonded over. If he had, surely enterprising collectors and Trekkies, see what they did there, collectors and Trekkies would have tracked down the issues Roddenberry read and consumed them voraciously. Regardless, old sci-fi magazines are worth a look. And there's William Shatner and his arch nemesis, George Takei. Oh my. I used to like George Takei, but I don't anymore. I've kind of fallen out with him because he's turned into a bit of a knobhead. Thanks to the Caprices, I don't know how to pronounce that. It's a planet in Battlestar Galactica, isn't it? Thanks to the caprices of a prison library curator, Gene Roddenberry would be brought to the world of Edgar Rice Burroughs. He recalls a man living in his LA neighborhood who discovered the famed adventure author while serving time. Roddenberry said, I then discovered in our neighborhood, living above a garage, an ex-con who had come into science fiction when he was in prison. He introduced me to John Carter and those wonderful Burroughs things. By the time I was 12 or 13, I'd been very much into the whole science fiction field. I thought he wasn't, though. He just said that he wasn't and he went on to become an aeronautical engineer. Anyway, whatever. It seems like those novels planted a germ in Roddenberry's head, eventually manifesting in sci-fi sagas like Star Trek. The names of the mysterious ex-con of the nerdy classmate were not shared with the 50-year mission editors. Burroughs, meanwhile, might be called one of the champions of pulp literature, and his many, many adventure stories inflamed the imaginations of millions of youngsters. Incidentally, the city of Tarzana, California was named after Tarzan when Burroughs moved there with his family in 1919. Of course, Burroughs' stories are often read as aggressively colonialist, while with brave white American heroes charging into foreign lands to impose their wills on others. That's what it was like back then. Star Trek, in contrast, often attempts with mixed success to tell anti-colonialist stories. The Prime Directive assures that Starfleet officers don't mess around with other cultures. Sci-fi novels and geek magazines cracked open the door. Roddenberry's personal politics completed the picture, and there's a link, obviously, to something about his personal politics. So there we go. So that's how Roddenberry got his start in science fiction, thanks to a nerd who limped and wheezed and an ex-con. We'll say the nerd was George McFly and the ex-con was Gary Beekler, who travelled back in time somehow. I'm kidding, obviously. Right, next. We're sticking with Slash Film, Metallic Eye Film. For more Star Trek, actually. Here we go. The Borg were the best Star Trek villains until they weren't. As Star Trek always tends to do, one may even say is wont to do, they always dilute their enemies over time. They always, ruin them, basically. They always ruin their enemies. And they kind of did with the Borg. They did the same with Species 8472. They started off, as a terrifying enemy, who could defeat the Borg. And then they diluted them down to just, people that we ended up kind of being friends with, sort of. Same with the Hirogen. By the way, it seems to be Voyager, doesn't it, that's doing this. The Hirogen started out as a great adversary. These huge hunters, basically, a bit like Predator, but without the mandibles. These huge hunters played by, tall actors in big bulky suits and stuff, who could, throw people around like nothing, to just regular sized aliens who were, pretty rubbish in the end. But yeah. Anyway, what does this article say? By the way, that's Hugh from the episode, Next Generation episode, Iborg. We also saw him in season 1 of Picard. Anyway, on Star Trek The Next Generation, I also saw him in the episodes Descent Part 1 and 2 in Next Generation. On Star Trek The Next Generation, the Borg were first introduced in the second season episode Q Who, May 8th, 1989. In the episode, the malevolent all-power space imp, all-power, Q, John Delancey, offered his magical powers to Captain Picard, Patrick Stewart, knowing that Starfleet will likely encounter things that his puny human mind couldn't handle. When Picard politely refuses, Q throws the Enterprise D thousands of light years away, 7,000 light years to be precise, landing it right in the path of a mysterious and enormous cube-shaped spacecraft. This was a ship belonging to the Borg, a species of cyborgs that share a single consciousness. The people inside have no free will and operate in service of the collective. They have been augmented with machinery and do not speak. When one dies, another merely takes its place. The Borg can travel at unbelievable speeds and can steal and incorporate technology into themselves. As Q describes them, they are the ultimate users. They see nothing in the galaxy but raw materials to steal and exploit. Like slasher movie villains, the Borg couldn't be reasoned with. They had no negotiable agenda. And also, like a slasher movie villain, they sustained injury and kept on moving forward. They were unfazed by pain. What was their origin? What was their goal? These were mysteries that Picard and his crew would never uncover. After a few failed attempts to communicate and losing lives to the Borg attack, Picard fled. He admitted he needed Q's help. The Borg were too much. Picard ultimately found the encounter to be a reminder not to be complacent. There are going to be terrors in the galaxy no one will be prepared for. It's a chilling episode and one of the best from The Next Generation. The Borg were Michael Myers by way of H.R. Giger. And there's one of the Borg in that episode accessing the Enterprise computer. The Borg was so terrifying in Q Who that the writers of Star Trek The Next Generation would have to bring them back eventually. Q Who ended with the implication that the Borg, while thousands of light years away, were going to be travelling to get the Enterprise and complete its job of assimilation. The spectre of the Borg hung over the series for a while, and at the end of the show's third season, audiences were treated to the best of both worlds. By the way, they expected, because I think they assumed that the Borg could travel at speeds, relatively equal-ish to, a starship. So like 7,000 light years had taken, about 7 years to get to Federation space. But it didn't. It took them, less than a year, didn't it? But we didn't know about transwarp conduits and that then. I don't know if they used them, I don't know, but anyway, that first cube. Right, where were we? The spectre of the Borg hung over the series for a while, then at the end of the show's third season, audiences were treated to the best of both worlds, June 18th and September 24th, 1990, perhaps the show's most famous installment. In the cliffhanger two-part episode, Picard was kidnapped and assimilated by the Borg. His knowledge was siphoned out of his brain, and the Borg used it to attack Earth. Well, they were going to. They didn't actually attack Earth, but they were on the way. Captain Riker, Jonathan Frakes, yes, Captain, yes, he was given a field commission of Captain, and then gave it up, became commander again for some weird reason. Underwent a career crisis as a result, having to take command of the Enterprise. Thousands of lives were lost at the Battle of Wolf 359. before Picard could be rescued and the Borg stopped. After that, it seemed like the show was done with the Borg. The unstoppable threat had been stopped, but many died and Picard was forever traumatized. In the show's following episode, Family, Picard admitted to his brother that the Borg hurt him more deeply than anyone can imagine. Picard broke down, something he rarely did. It seems that the trauma lingered. But the writers couldn't stay away from the Borg, and in many ways it's been downhill ever since. With every new reappearance of the famed Star Trek villains came a twist in their ethos, an alteration or expansion of what was known before. And each new twist made the Borg less threatening. Kind of as a rule, but they did add some cool things, the injection tubules and stuff where they inject the nanoprobes into people. That were cool. Yes, I'm an old Trekkie shaking his fist at a cloud. Who we're talking about? Whitney Seabold. That sounds like a name, that. There we go. That sounds like a name from a writer from the original series, shouldn't it? That you see at the end, written by Whitney Seabold. Anyway, yes, I'm an old Trekkie shaking his fist at a cloud, but one could argue that the Borg were never more threatening than they were 33 years ago. The Borg returned in an episode called I-Borg, May 10th, 1992. It seems a small Borg ship carrying only 5 drones crashed on an uninhabited planet. One drone survived, and the Enterprise took it on board to study it. They find that the drone, Jonathan De Arco, I thought it was Del Arco, I could be wrong, once separated from its central collective, begins to regain its sense of individuality. Not his identity prior to assimilation, mind you, but a new sense of self-awareness. Geordie LeVar Burton names the drone Hugh. I hated that bit. Hugh, we'll call you Hugh. Pete's sake. The Enterprise finds a way to implant a program into Hugh's brain that, when reintroduced to the collective, would destroy them. This becomes unethical, however, in light of Hugh's rediscovered sense of agency. Yeah, it wouldn't have really destroyed them, though, would it? I don't know. It'd have shut them down, wouldn't it? Which I suppose is a way of, you could say, destroying them, yeah, I suppose. But it was more of a puzzle. They put a puzzle into it, like a non-solvable puzzle that would have passed through the collective as they tried to solve it. But anyway, and it eventually shut them down. Anyway, this becomes unethical, however, pardon me, in light of Hugh's rediscovered sense of agency. Hugh chooses to be reassimilated, but a last-minute twist reveals that the Borg are unable to reassimilate him. That twist would lead directly to the tiresome two-parter Descent. It's quite good as Descent. It's not the Borg bits. June 21st to September 20th, 1993, when Hugh's individuality spread to other drones, leaving them aimless and in need of a leader. Law, Brent Spiner, stepped in to form a Borg cult. It's a bad episode. It's fine. It's fine. It's more about Data, really, and how Law tries to control him, which he does, and turns him into a baddie for a while. But it's also, really, in my view, it's also about other crew people stepping up and taking command. We see Beverly Crusher in command of the Enterprise and doing a damn good job at it. It's a really good episode, in my opinion. Anyway, also, if the Borg can assimilate people with free will, why can't they re-assimilate drones with free will? Certainly, a hard reboot is part of their program. You're overthinking it, Whitney. The notion that the Borg could be rescued from assimilation by merely isolating them made their mysterious culture of ultimate consumption less permanent and hence less threatening. It also cheapened Picard's survival. If anyone can survive, then rescuing Picard became something easily replicated. Yeah, well, so what? That Law could then step in and manipulate the Borg meant they had no real motivation to attack. As villains, they lost a lot of their edge. But yeah, it could only manipulate them because that ship, the one that Hugh were on, had lost its way, and the Borg on that ship had essentially become, because maybe it's because they were so far from the collective, maybe they were in contact with it properly, and just the Borg on that ship had become easy to manipulate because of what had happened to Hugh. But anyway, and his sense of individuality had spread amongst them, hadn't it? Anyway, then in 1996, the Borg were dealt what was, to my mind, their death blow. Jonathan Frakes, Jonathan, is he from the 18th century? I am Sir Jonathan Frakes. Jonathan Frakes' feature film Star Trek First Contact featured a Borg ship that travelled back in time to the eve of Earth's first contact in 2063. First contact with the Vulcans was a monumental occasion for Earth and the catalyst that would usher in planetary change. Excuse me. Towards peace centuries later. The Borg, rather confoundingly, decided that they wanted to halt the formation of the Federation. Their motivation for halting this particular event is never explained. If it was assimilation and destruction they wanted, why not go back to 1940? Or heck, why not 2.4 million years ago? Assimilate humanity when they were still proto-human. By choosing this date in particular, the Borg suddenly had a purpose, a scheme. A scheme indicates that the Borg is calculating, and if they can calculate, their motives are negotiable. Again, I think you're overthinking it, Whitney. But, any script, any story you can pick apart, can't you? But you've got to have, a reasonable level of, what's the word? You know what I mean? What they call it? Level of disbelief. What's the bloody phrase? I can't remember. You got to have that, haven't you? And it was fine. First Contact were fine. It was a good film. It was exciting. Yeah, it wasn't perfect. It did have its problems. I mean, the Borg have begun an invasion of the Federation, and this time there may be no stopping them. How many ships? One. But it was a cool battle scene anyway. But it also could be argued that they had to go back to 2063, for a reason. Maybe they couldn't just go anywhere. Maybe there's the fixed points in time that you can only travel back to, which is why when we see time travel, there's always something important about to happen. So maybe traveling through time can only send you to like nexuses or whatever in the timeline. That's just a guess. Just me with my writer's head on. Anyway, additionally, First Contact introduced the notion of a Borg queen, Alice Krieger, a free-willed commander for the Borg. She's a very human character, even though she's not human. I think, what is it, species 117, something like that. An early number, anyway. She's a very human character who has desires and motivations. She seduces Data, Brent Spiner, and claims to want Picard as a mate. I've got lots of mates. The idea that the Borg were a soulless race of all-consuming machines is now long gone. They've been replaced by something more wicked and malevolent. Even the design of the Borg changed into something more sinewy and less mechanical. The Borg ships are now warm, steamy places, and the Borg themselves are veiny and scowly. First Contact turned them into action movie terrorists. What a snore. Whitney, you're being a misery guts. You are. It's a decent film, it's First Contact, and it's fun. And it made the Borg kind of scary, to be honest. I know they were scary to begin with, but in a different way. It still made them, haunted house kind of scary Borg. From there, it's been a gradual softening of the Borg to the point where they are mere inconvenience rather than an unstoppable threat. Right, Voyager, there's the lovely 7 of 9. Not looking quite as lovely there. The Borg played a major role in Star Trek Voyager as the titular ship found itself needing to travel through Borg-owned space. That the Borg would have their own territory handily contradicts what had been known about them up to that point. Did they negotiate a treaty? Surely the Borg wouldn't care for property, but merely travel out and assimilate, right? Well, maybe so, but they still have territory that, places that they have assimilated, they would still be around, wouldn't they? So maybe, maybe it's not. Maybe they're not thinking this is our space, but they're just there, aren't they? Occupying it. No, it seems that the ownership of certain technologies is important to them. Well, it always has been, hasn't it? Any technology that they find interesting, that they want to assimilate, they go after, don't they? At the end of the 3rd season of Voyager, Captain Janeway, Kate Mulgrew, would actually negotiate with the Borg exclamation mark, to assure her safe passage. But there is a reason for it, because the Borg are under attack from species 8472. So that's why they're willing to negotiate, because they've never been as threatened. Did you watch it, Whitney? A Borg drone called 7 of 9, Jerry Ryan, was assigned to the Voyager before eventually separating from the collective and joining the crew. You know, not willingly. 7 became the most important character on the show. Oh, yeah, it's somewhat for the dads, basically. You know, eye candy, you know, it has been argued that they're not there to be easy on the eye, but she was. The Borg can now be hoodwinked and negotiated with. But any intelligence can, you know. Nothing's perfect. They strive for perfection, but nothing's perfect. In the episode Unimatrix Zero from New York, May 24th and October 4th, 2000, Janeway and the crew even allowed themselves to be assimilated, knowing they could eventually escape. It seems that assimilation ain't no thing. Being a Borg is now avoidable or undoable. By the time audiences, it was not that simple. You're oversimplifying it. In some parts, you're overthinking it, and then in some parts, you're oversimplifying it. You know, for the sake of your article. By the time audiences reached Star Trek Picard, the Borg were more or less through as villains. In the first season, Hugh returned to reveal a massive de-assimilation project on that cube. You know, they'd found a cube, and that's what they were doing, de-assimilating the Borg from that cube. The Romulans had it, didn't they? It was them that found it. Season 2 saw Dr. Girardi, Alison Pill, being assimilated, but to form a newer, gentler Borg. I mean, admit that was bloody awful. By the time it was revealed that Picard's son, Ed Spaliers, had an X-Men-like Borg gene in his brain, and the Borg wanted to infiltrate humanoid minds merely to blow up the Earth, they want to blow it, not to take over. It was also tiresome and silly. The big Borg twist at the end of the third season of Picard felt so boring. Actually, I admit, I wasn't that keen with that. It seemed, I don't know, we had all this thing with the changelings, and then suddenly it turned out it was the Borg, and then, so what happened with the changelings then? I know they tried to wrap it up at the end, but how did the changelings and the Borg come, cross paths and all that? And how did they end up being allies? Don't know. Anyway, the Borg were in season finales too often. I agree with that part. Anyway, by Picard, it was extremely difficult to care about the Borg and their evolution. Yes, evolution from cold machines into dupes. Could the Borg have been salvaged? Perhaps the twist in Picard would have been stronger if they hadn't been seen at all on Star Trek Voyager. It's a bit tricky, isn't it? That is, if they had stayed a mystery and were absent for a long time. I think they did overuse them a little bit in Star Trek Voyager, to be honest. The return of a long-lost villain. I mean, you had 7 of 9 on the ship. She should have been the Borg. They did overuse them a bit. The return of a long-lost villain is more exciting than the return of a villain that always returns. Of course, there is an interpretation of the Borg that makes their eventual arc and softening more dramatically satisfying. If the Borg were once described as the ultimate users, they might be seen as a symbol for the modern human tendency to overconsume. They are the ideal consumer society, buying up and using everything in their path, needed or not. It's kind of the Ferengi, though, isn't it? Their need to consume, however, led to increasingly desperate tactics. Escaping consumerism leads to manipulation by darker political powers. A leader, namely a queen, is eventually needed, telling them how to consume. Gradually, it becomes an advertising game, hoping that others can be convinced to join the consumption collective. By Picard, their last-ditch mind invasion game failed, and the Borg were revealed to be completely ruined. They ultimately consumed themselves with only one queen and a few drones left. I don't think that's true myself. My personal opinion, because it's never really said on screen, really, is that the Borg are still out there. They're still out there in the Delta Quadrant. The vast majority of the Borg, and we know that there's more than one queen, or the queen exists out of time, or whatever. So I think they're still out there. The Borg that we saw in Picard, I don't think, were all the Borg that were left. I don't think, the Federation has dealt the Borg, huge defeats and huge blows, but I still think they're out there, and they're still dangerous, in my opinion. While this may make them less interesting as villains, it does lend the Borg a tragic air. In the end, their desire to consume everything ruined them. It was a self-defeating system all along. If the Borg showed up in Picard and the characters all rolled their eyes in exasperation, it might have been the more appropriate response. But they don't, though, do they? When you mention the Borg in Star Trek, everybody always gets scared, don't they? And that came out funny, didn't it? Scared. The Borg are still scary, in my opinion. And you're gonna, you're in for a fight if you're up against the Borg. So a lot of the article, I pressed the wrong button again. A lot of the article I didn't agree with. Right, what's next? Right, we're on lists now with 3 lists, and then that takes us to the end. On full screen. Right. Let's see what this says. The 6 biggest mistakes in recent Star Wars movies and TV shows we can all agree on. We will see. As I said, I've not read these, so I don't know. There's no question that the past 8 years of Star Wars have been divisive. Yes, divisive, not divisive. You don't say divid. You want to divid that 3 ways. It's a divisive. No one's going to debate that. Some fans hate the sequel trilogy but love The Mandalorian and Rogue One. I quite like The Mandalorian. I won't say I love it, but I love Rogue One. I think it's great. Some adore The Last Jedi but hate The Rise of Skywalker. No, they're both rubbish. But The Rise of Palpatine, is more of a comedy. It's more funny than fun. Then there are plenty that only like Andor. And then there are people like me. Andor's fine. There are people like me who find plenty to enjoy in all of the above. There are some decisions, though, that we can all agree didn't play out how Lucasfilm have hoped, creatively or financially. There are things I hope the studio can learn from, so hopefully ensure that we continue to get more expansion of the Star Wars franchise for many years to come. So let's count them down from the most harmless to the most egregious. I'm live. Sorry. Listen. You should let me know when you're live before you do it. Number 6, the shoddy production values of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Actually, you know what? Never mind. We're not going to do these. I told you I wasn't in the mood. It's just a list. They're just lists. What lists did we have? I'll show you what they were going to be. And I can't be bothered, to be honest. So I'll show you. We'll call it a draw. The 6 biggest Star Wars mistakes, 15 great movies that spawned terrible sequels, and the harsh realities of watching the video. The link's in the description if you want to read them. I'm going to call it a draw there. Right. So we'll leave it there. So anyway, thanks for watching. Wherever you are, look after each other. And until next time, I'll see you.